Seems like every time I turn around these days, another big social media influencer is ripping on Shenmue. This time, I was especially disappointed to see one of the worst takes on a video game ever to mar the YouTube landscape. Super Eyepatch Wolf's cynical rant on Shenmue III. Hi, I'm Segalacious, and this is the Virtua Bros channel, a place where fans like myself aren't afraid to stand up for good games against the prevailing popular opinions of the day. If you're a fan of Super Eyepatch Wolf, then I would imagine you've already clicked the dislike button for the title of this video alone. Here's the thing, I still really like Super Eyepatch Wolf as a content creator. The editing, narration, and nostalgic emotions evoked by his videos are all top-notch. I like that a creator as talented as him feels so passionately about a series that I truly love. In spite of myself, I actually enjoyed watching his video on Shenmue III, and I even agree with some of his points. Anyway, let me level with you. The title of this video being a transparent attempt at clickbait is no accident. I carefully chose it to make the point that using negativity to cheaply generate interest is something that Eyepatch Wolf frequently engages in himself. To great effectiveness, might I add. What with his Irish brogue and his breathy pillow talk.
I have tried, God help me, I have tried to love this game, but Shenmue III feels like a relic of outdated game design while simultaneously being a far worse experience than the original games, destroying any potential the series had.
Duh, curse you, your voice is butter in my ears! Nevertheless, I'm going to be taking Eyepatch Wolf to task in this video by exposing how he disingenuously tries to lend credibility to his opinions by couching them in a pseudo-academically styled presentation, and I'm going to do it by using his faulty analysis of Shenmue III as an example. In demonstrating how the majority of his points are exaggerated, misleading, and uninformed, it will become clear that Eyepatch Wolf is deliberately misrepresenting Shenmue III for his own personal benefit by engaging in methods that are both inadequate and inexcusable for a creator of his ability. As always, this is not personal. I think that Eyepatch Wolf is probably a decent enough guy, and before refuting his points, I want to say that I really appreciate the effort he made to communicate his respect for all of the people who worked on Shenmue III. That was good form. And look, I'm not a blind fanboy when it comes to this series either. I agree that Shenmue III is not as good as the previous two entries in the series, and that the combat system doesn't even come close to being on the same level of quality as the first Shenmue. Super Eyepatch Wolf is entitled to his own opinion. However, what he's not entitled to is doing a hatchet job on Shenmue III without being called out for it. If you're a fan of his or agreed with his last video on Shenmue III, be warned, you aren't ready. Let's get into it.
Oh, Shenmue.
The first major problem with his video is simply the fact that he criticizes a kickstarted retro-style game for feeling too much like the Dreamcast-era experience it originated as a series. This is something he owns up to himself around the 16-minute mark.
I get at this point that some people might say that I'm criticizing Shenmue 3 for basically being Shenmue, and to an extent, I get that. Those games could be dull, this game can be dull.
Meaning for over a quarter of an hour, he hasn't done anything but complain about how much Shenmue 3 acts like the original two games. Parallels can be drawn between almost every complaint he makes up to this point with Shenmue 1 and 2, games he claims to really like. Those familiar with the series will immediately notice how having Shenhua around doing housework and frequently expressing her concern over Ryo's well-being is reminiscent of how Ine-san would always be working around the house and chiding Ryo for coming home too late. Taking off and putting on your shoes in the den area is a callback to Ryo entering and leaving his home and the Hazuki dojo. This cutscene also allows the player to view the detail of Ryo's shoes. One pair actually has the characters S4 written on them to hint that Shenmue 4 may be coming sooner than anticipated. Now, I can understand feeling annoyed at having to sit through these cutscenes every single time you enter or leave the den area, but instead of complaining like a git, just press the button to skip this cutscene. Honestly, did he not know about this feature? It seems like a pretty big oversight on his part, but anyway, let's continue. Being inconvenienced by a martial arts master and forced to catch chickens for days on end feels pretty similar to Ryo's martial arts training in Shenmue II. Carrying books and catching leaves for Master Li Xiaotao at Manmo Temple were just as inconvenient and served as a test of patience for Ryo. Here's another parallel. Consider the hotel lady bothering you every day to pay her. She is almost certainly a reference to that shady guy Joy introduces Ryo to at the Come Over guest house in Shenmue II. I get that Super Eyepatch Wolf probably doesn't appreciate these homages to the original games, but here's a part that really annoyed me in his critique. No one is forcing you to pick up these apples every day in the hotel. These are there to serve as yet another callback to the first Shenmue, where a player had the ability to pick up and examine the fruit from a bowl in Ryo's house. Seriously, complaining about minor details that serve as intentional callbacks to the first two games in a title that was kickstarted specifically for fans is just pedantic. And another thing, this game didn't make him defend the game design of Heavy Rain. He did that himself because he doesn't really understand what Shenmue is supposed to be. Comparing Shenmue to Heavy Rain is very much comparing apples to oranges. They are each using the mundane to achieve totally different ends. While Heavy Rain uses quick-timer events to go through daily motions in order to help the player empathize with the game's characters, Shenmue is doing something else. The point of inconveniencing the player in Shenmue 1 was twofold: to help encourage players to explore minutia, and to immerse the player in a specific historical, cultural setting. Here's an example. In the first Shenmue, Ryo can purchase a soft drink from a number of nearby vending machines. When this happens, a cutscene triggers in which the player must watch Ryo drink the entire beverage while standing in one place before disposing of the can in the proper receptacle. This is actually a cultural idiosyncrasy of Japan. For whatever reason, whether for etiquette or just out of habit, people don't walk around while drinking soda in Japan. Similarly, small actions like taking off one's shoes before entering a home or dojo is common practice in Japanese culture. An example of this in Shenmue III can be seen when Ryo is forced to walk, not run, in front of religious shrines out of respect for local customs.
There's a small shrine in Yawu that the game forces you to walk, not run through. The problem being that you have to pass back and forth through this area several times a day, and there are several areas across Yawu like this. If this is to hide loading, I genuinely think loading screens would have been less frustrating.
Dude, seriously? Look, what I'm trying to say is that while Heavy Rain's mundanities immerse the player into specific characters, Shenmue's mundaneness immerses the player into a historical, cultural setting.
And so now what I want to talk about is an area where Shenmue III is so catastrophically worse than the originals that it destroys the entire experience.
Is Shenmue 3's combat worse than the original two games? Yes, but claiming that this destroys the entire experience is melodramatic. While nothing will ever be quite as good as the Virtua Fighter engine for me, there are still some aspects of the new fighting system that are an improvement over the old. Being able to toggle between opponents when fighting multiple enemies makes a huge difference during free battle sequences. Certain moves that instantly crumple your enemies on impact feel really good when they connect, and occasionally create some hilarious jank when opponents ragdoll in certain situations. One thing I really liked about the new system is the slow motion mechanic that triggers during a successful dodge when Ryo's health is in the yellow.
Eat this!
Super Eyepatch Wolf never covered any of this and appears to once again be deliberate in this omission. While undeniably inferior to the original games, there is still some fun to be had with the new combat system. Earlier I mentioned that Super Eyepatch Wolf exploits the ignorance of his viewers by trying to make his arguments appear more profound than they actually are. One of the ways he does this is by throwing jargon at his viewers. In the case of Shenmue III, words like verisimilitude and intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation are employed in order to impress his viewers. By creating the illusion of having a certain expertise on the subject being spoken on, he comes across as a reliable narrator in the minds of his audience. As such, he can make his claims seem stronger than they really are through the imitation of a sophisticated argument that sounds good but fails to hold up under scrutiny. In this way, he can fabricate his own credibility and pretend to educate his audience on the inside baseball of game design. By so doing, he proves himself to be little more than a dilettante with just enough knowledge to be dangerous. Case in point, he uses the tornado kick as his example of Shenmue III's combat moving from intrinsic design to an extrinsic one. His use of these terms is imprecise, since it is possible for someone to play a fighting game for external rewards such as winning a grand prize in a tournament, thus being extrinsically motivated. Despite somewhat mishandling this vocabulary, I get what he's saying. He prefers a system in which the player gets better at the game as opposed to a player's character getting strong enough to meet the next challenge. However, part of getting better at a fighting game is recognizing which moves are most viable in terms of risk versus reward. The example provided next demonstrates a failure to grasp this concept as well. Once again, he explains the execution of the tornado kick in an overblown manner by stating that the kick input must be double tapped in a specific rhythm and that the move does huge damage. First of all, there is not a specific rhythm to tapping kick for the tornado kick. The second kick input can be buffered or delayed during pretty much the entirety of the first kick's animation. Also, while the move does look great, it does not do huge damage. In fact, Tornado Kick in the original games is not a very good move. It has a slow startup, and due to the first kick pushing back your enemy on contact, the second kick seldom lands. Even when it does connect with your opponent, as you can see here, the elbow assault is a much more powerful move than the Tornado Kick. Ironically, while the animation for the Tornado Kick looks worse in Shenmue III, it is actually a more reliable move due to having better range and damage than in the original games. This makes the Tornado Kick a poor choice to illustrate his point, as a throw move such as Arm Break Fire is much better suited to this use. It seems as though Super Eyepatch Wolf doesn't really know what he's talking about in terms of Shenmue's fighting systems. Any of them, and only chose Tornado Kick as his example because the cutscene in which it is learned is one of Shenmue's most well-known moments. This is a prime example of Super Eyepatch Wolf using the pretense of knowledge to impress casual viewers with misinformation. Since Shenmue's fanbase is so small, he probably knew he would be able to get away with this without anyone of enough import noticing. There's so much more. He complains for ages about having to earn money to progress the plot while claiming that the game forces him to play Flower, Bird, Wind, Moon, a minigame which he frequently botches the name of. There are several problems with this. First, there are multiple minigames besides Flower, Bird, Wind, Moon to earn tokens in order to cash in expensive prizes. Second, he completely leaves out the fishing minigame, which adds some variety to making money. Third, and most important of all, he claims herbs are a pittance of the money needed to earn the 2,000 yuan or even the 5,000 yuan required later in the game. The thing about that is, herbs are all you need. It's fairly easy to obtain multiple herb sets that sell for 450 to 650 yuan a piece, not to mention the ability to sell capsule toy sets for hundreds or sometimes even 1,000 yuan. There is no way around the fact that Super Eyepatch Wolf was being purposely misleading concerning this detail. Sure, it made for some funny and entertaining parts of the video, but it's a lie. And since we're talking about earning money in Shenmue 3, I just want to remind everyone that in both Shenmue 1 and 2, games which he claims to like, Ryo has to earn money for various reasons, whether it be for a trip to Hong Kong, bribing Ren, or for entering fighting tournaments in Kowloon. Ryo has always needed to hustle a large amount of cash in order to reach his next objective. Criticizing Shenmue 3 for this is blatantly unfair. This isn't even his worst offense. Super Eyepatch Wolf claims that 95% of Shenmue 3's story is nothing without even knowing what the purpose of Shenmue's story is all about. For some reason, he seems to think, and by no means is he alone in this, that until Ryo gets some closure with Lan Di, the story will not have progressed in any meaningful way. I'm surprised someone who knows that Shenmue started as a Virtua Fighter RPG knows so little about the story this series is trying to tell. This is not a story about how Ryo avenged his father by defeating Lan Di. This is a story about how Akira Yuki learned all of the Baji Chuan martial arts moves that made him the most popular character in the Virtua Fighter series and the champion of the second World Fighting Tournament. Every time Ryo learns a new Baji Chuan move, be it the elbow assault, double blow, double storm kick, counter elbow assault, thunder palm, etc., he is becoming more like his matured Virtua Fighter counterpart. The progression of Shenmue's story is in Ryo's progression as a martial artist. Since Ryo increases greatly as a martial artist, in Shenmue III by learning more Baji Chuan techniques, the story does progress significantly. Speaking of which, while admitting that learning the body check in Bailu Village is pretty cool, he claims that learning the reverse body check is pointless because it's the exact same move.
And it's like, no, Yu Suzuki, why? Why would you do this? Why is this what you made? And then, when you finally, after hours by the scroll, the last page is missing, and you can't even learn the move, but then an old man with a bird just teaches you the move anyway, and it's the same move! It's the same move you already learned! Like, the animation's the exact same! And why? And oh my god, I've wasted my entire fucking life waiting for this game! Was Shenmue ever actually good?
The ignorance of this statement is overwhelming. What Shenmue 3 calls the body check is actually Akira Yuki's Youshi Senrin, a deadly attack in which Akira dodges behind his opponent and strikes with his own back. The reverse body check is actually Akira's Kozenheki, in which Akira pulls his opponent forward before dashing behind and striking with his back. While this distinction may appear subtle to those unfamiliar with Virtua Fighter, these are two very different attacks for very different situations. Claiming they are the same thing is like claiming that the elbow assault and counter elbow assault are the same move. It's incredibly frustrating to see so much misinformation being spread over the internet on such a large platform. There is still so much more. I could get into how the stamina and training systems help to create an addictive flow that elevates Shenmue's side activities to greater purpose than the previous games in the series, how hunting for Chobu-chan creates a fun incentive for exploration, or even how certain characters in Bailu Village have interesting backgrounds and Virtua Fighter parallels. Instead, for the sake of brevity, I want to focus on the most egregious insult to the series of all: the terrible, continuity-breaking fanfiction of the game's ending. Spoilers ahead, not that it really matters anymore at this point.
Ryo can't touch Lan Di, while Lan Di's attacks are overwhelming and unstoppable. But just as the light begins to fade for Ryo, time slows to a crawl and the QuickTime event for the body check appears on screen. We hit it and boom! Ryo slams his body into Lan Di for the first time ever, landing an attack on the man who killed his father, and Ryo stares back at him, his eyes filled with determination. Fury flashes across Lan Di's face and he lunges forward, striking Ryo down with the same attack he used to kill Ryo's father at the very beginning of Shenmue 1.
While I like the storyboard presentation of this fanfiction, the ideas it conveys completely demolish Shenmue's continuity. The idea of Ryo being able to connect a blow with Lan Di, especially with the body check, is absurd on multiple levels. We know that Ryo's father, Iwao, already received the same training as Ryo in Bailu decades before Shenmue 3 takes place. That means by the time of this game, Ryo is at best as strong as his father when he was killed by Lan Di in Shenmue 1. It seems likely that Iwao would have kept training and improving since his time in Bailu, which would imply that in Shenmue 1, he may have been even stronger than Ryo at the end of Shenmue 3. Here's what happened when he fought Lan Di.
it up, I'll allow you to die like a warrior.
Not a single hit found its mark. There is no way for Ryo to be anywhere near strong enough to even touch Lan Di. At least, not at this point in the story. Also, Ryo being able to hit Lan Di with the body check is even more far-fetched, since he is told multiple times that he has not yet mastered the body check by more than one martial arts teacher.
Anything you picked up now would only be half-baked.
But
Do you hear me? A half-baked skill is a double-edged blade. These things cannot be learned overnight. You're not quick enough, yet. But if you can catch these chickens, you might be able to pull it off.
that makes more sense.
But don't think pulling it off once or twice means that you've learned it. You may well learn the technique, but if you lack the proper skill, it will not be effective.
The body check isn't something that can be mastered in such a short time span as what takes place in Shenmue III. Two variations of the body check he has learned so far are actually lesser versions of Akira Yuki's iconic Tetsu Zanko, or Iron Mountain Lean. When the cormorant fisherman tells Ryo that the damage possible from using the body check will be halved in the hands of an amateur, he wasn't kidding. The full potential of the Tetsu Zanko is unleashed when landed on counter hit, especially on a side-turned opponent. This move unleashes a truly terrifying amount of damage that is capable of turning the tables of any situation, no matter how desperate. Not only is Ryo supposed to hit Lan Di, but he's supposed to do so with a move he is nowhere close to mastering? What happened to Ryo when he fought Lan Di is exactly what Master Li Xiaotao said would happen in Shenmue II.
If I were the person upon whom you sought revenge, you'd already be dead. Heidi Shu. If I were Lan Di, you'd already be dead. Try hitting me for once.
Just when I thought this fanfiction couldn't get any worse, Super Eyepatch Wolf suggests that Lan Di should hit Ryo with the same move that killed his father in the first game. Oh really? You mean the Enshin Sho? You mean that Ryo should be hit with Lao Chan's move that is literally capable of knocking down walls, a move that killed Iwao and even Ryo himself in the bad ending of Shenmue 1 when he was at full strength? So let me get this straight. After taking that hit, Ryo should survive it because what? We arbitrarily decided he should be given plot armor? I'm sorry, but Super Eyepatch Wolf is clearly out of his depth when it comes to this series. He doesn't understand Shenmue at all. Now, I will admit that Shenmue 3's ending did not feel satisfying. Like the combat system, the ending seems to have been compromised in order to ensure that the game actually got released. Even so, at its core, the ending is perfectly fine as is. It just needs a bit more polish. Throw in some QTEs that show Ryo using everything in his arsenal against Lan Di, only to realize that his actions are as futile as his own father's before him. Add in some flashbacks of Iwao being killed by Lan Di, and Ryo's nightmares of the night when the snow turned to rain. Have him remember when Li Xiaotao told him during a sparring session that if she were Lan Di, he would already be dead. Driving home that hopelessness would have created greater emotional impact for the player. But if you're really in love with the idea of hitting Lan Di with the body check, here's how it could be in a future game as something that honors Shenmue's continuity and the legacy of Virtua Fighter. Ryo squares off against Lan Di in their final showdown. While Ryo is strong enough to connect with a few hits, the battle is still hopelessly one-sided. Ryo is pummeled nearly to death as Lan Di toys with him, effortlessly outclassing him at every point. Lan Di decides to end their fight once and for all, preparing to strike with the Enshin Sho. Ryo sees it coming in slow motion, recognizing it as the move that killed his father on that fateful day when the snow turned to rain. Just before it lands, Ryo sees a tiny flaw in the attack. Seizing his chance, he gathers what little strength remains within him to dodge with blinding speed to Landi's side, striking him full on with a perfect body check that counters Landi's own move. This Iron Mountain lean obliterates Landi in a single move, knocking him to the ground and rendering him incapable of continuing their fight. Something like that is how you make the body check count. Huge upsets like this are a large part of what makes the body check or Tetsu Zanko so cool. Hitting Landi with a novice level body check and having him just shrug it off isn't just a bad idea because of the continuity issues, it's a complete waste of the payoff the series could be building towards. I get that Eyepatch Wolf was disappointed in the ending, but the one he created in his hubris is far worse than the one we already have. I could keep going on, but I think that this is all enough to show that Super Eyepatch Wolf isn't informed enough on Shenmue or Virtua Fighter for his opinions to be taken seriously. It's a shame that so many people will never play these games and form their own opinions of them. Instead, over 1 million people will be content to let their favorite social media influencer do their thinking for them, and it's all because of a misleading, misinformed, and misguided video. I'm not saying that anyone has to like Shenmue III. It's okay to feel disappointed with how it turned out. What I am saying is that unfairly slandering a game in order to shill for the clicks and attention negativity brings, while simultaneously trying to convince longtime fans to give up on a series that they have brought back from the brink after so many years, is selfish and irresponsible. Shenmue III didn't destroy the potential this series has, but it sure seems like that's what you, Super Eyepatch Wolf, are trying to do.
Ultimately, what Shenmue 3 is what happens when you can't let go of the way things were. And I don't just mean that about you, Suzuki. I mean it about me. I mean it about us. And I think it's time to move on. And honestly, that kills me.
That a creator as talented as he is would stoop so low as to lie and mislead in order to sell out a game series that he used to be a fan of is more disappointing than Shenmue 3 could ever be. I'd like to thank my Patreon backers, but I don't have any. And that's because I made this video for free and I really care about the Shenmue series enough to want to see it continue. Rather than seeking personal gain, I just want more Shenmue games to be released until the entire story has been told the way it was intended. To all my Friendmues out there, take heart. With the Shenmue anime announcement, the potential of this series is increasing all the time. Keep fighting the good fight, the Virtua fight, and let's get Shenmue 4.
いつか見た夢のように頬を撫でて通り過ぎる